so much fun to hear that music. It sort of puts you right in the mood, doesn't it? It's great stuff. It is so atmospheric, and it sort of puts us all in a happy mood, and we're ready to read after listening to a little Irish washerwoman. Hi Deb, hi Melissa, Sharon, Rebecca, SDS Davidson. Okay, from northeast of Austin, Texas. Glad to have someone from Texas on the line with us today. Tina. Bill Graff is feeling a bit of a come on. Don't don't feel that, Bill. I'm just checking to see where you're listening from. There's no come on here. I'm feeling it makes me feel a little. I'm feeling a little sweaty here. No, there's no come on. Anyway, we're going to be picking up the long winter today with a chapter which we started yesterday and was interrupted by the blower of our gardener who was doing the weekly cleanup around the house. So I'm sorry about that. It's blasting wind, but not the blasting wind we want for the long winter. So again, picking up with One Bright Day. Here we go. And Catherine was watching yesterday and told me that I was leaning out of the frame a lot as I was reading. So I'm going to try and be conscious of that today. So I'm not sort of disappearing as I'm reading. So I'll try and stay in the frame. So remember, they were in the midst of one more blizzard, maybe the second blizzard of the season, second or third blizzard of the season. So we're picking up with that blizzard lasted only 2 days. Tuesday morning, Laura woke up suddenly. She lay with her eyes wide open, listening to hear again what had awakened her. There was no sound at all, and then she knew. The stillness had startled her awake. There was no noise of winds, no swish, swish of icy snow scouring the walls and roof and window. The sun was glowing bright through the frost on the window at the top of the stairs, and downstairs, Ma's smile was like sunshine. "The blizzard's over," she said. "It was only a 2 days blizzard." You could never tell what a blizzard will do," Pa agreed. "It may be that your hard winter won't prove to be so hard after all," Ma said happily. "Now the sun is shining. They should have the trains running again in no time. And Laura, I'm sure there will be school today. Better get yourself ready for it while I get breakfast." Laura went upstairs to tell Carrie to put on her school dress. In the warm kitchen again, she scrubbed her face and neck well with soap and pinned up her braids. Pa breezed in gaily from doing the chores. "Old Sol's bright and shining this morning," he told them. "Looks like his face was well washed in snow." Hashed brown potatoes were on the table, and Ma's wild ground cherry preserve shone golden in a glass bowl. Ma stacked a platter with toast browned in the oven, and then took from the oven a small dish of butter. "I had to warm the butter," she said. "It was frozen as hard as a rock. I could not cut it. I hope Mr. Boast brings us some more soon. This is what the cobbler threw at his wife." Grace and Carrie were puzzled. And Dean's a little puzzled too, frankly. While all the others laughed, it showed how happy Ma was that she would make jokes. "That was his all," Mary said, and Laura exclaimed, "Oh no, it was the last. That was all he had." Girls, Ma said gently because they were laughing too much at the table. And then Laura said, but I thought we were out of butter when we didn't have any yesterday. "Pancakes were good with salt pork," said Ma. "I saved the butter for toast. There was just enough butter for a scraping on every slice." Breakfast was so merry in the warmth and stillness and light that the clock was striking 8:30 before they finished, and Ma said, "Run along, girls. This one time, I'll do your housework." The whole outdoors was dazzling, sparkling brightly in the bright sunshine. All the length of Main Street was a high drift of snow, a ridge taller than Laura. She and Carrie had to climb up to its top and then carefully down its other side. The snow was packed so hard that their shoes made no marks on it and their heels could dig no dents to keep them from slipping. And here they are, they're arriving at school. You see the snow everywhere and the icicles on the side of the schoolhouse. In the schoolyard was another glittering drift, almost as high as the schoolhouse. Cap Garland and Ben and Arthur and the little Wilmarth boys were skating down it on their shoes, as Laura used to slide on Silver Lake. And Mary Power and Minnie were standing out in the cold sunshine by the door, watching the fun the boys were having. "Hello, Laura," Mary Power said gladly, and she tucked her mittened hand under Laura's arm and squeezed it. They were pleased to see each other again. It seemed a long time since Friday, and even since the Saturday afternoon that they had meant to spend together. But there was no time to talk, for Teacher came to the door, and girls and boys must go in and do their lessons. At recess, Mary Power and Laura and Minnie stood at the window and watched the boys sliding down the snowdrift. Laura wished she could go outdoors to play too. "I wish we weren't too big now," she said. "I don't think it's any fun being a young lady." "Well, we can't help growing up," Mary Power said. "What would you do if you were caught in a blizzard, Mary?" Minnie Johnson was asking. "I guess I would just keep on walking. You wouldn't freeze if you kept on walking," Mary answered. "If you'd tire yourself out, you'd get so tired you'd die," said Minnie. "Well, what would you do?" Mary Power asked her. "I'd dig into a snowbank and let the snow cover me up. I don't think you'd freeze to death in a snowbank. Would you, Laura?" "I don't know," Laura said. What would you do, Laura, if you got caught in a blizzard?" Minnie insisted. "Well, I wouldn't get caught," Laura answered. She did not like to think about it. She would rather talk with Mary Power about other things, but Miss Garland rang the bell, and the boys came trooping in, red with the cold and grinning. That whole day long, everyone was as cheerful as the sunshine. At noon, Laura and Mary Power and Carrie with the Beardsley girls raced in the shouting crowd over the big snowdrifts home to dinner. On top of the high drift that was Main Street, some went north and some went south, and Laura and Carrie slid down its east side to their own front door. Pa was already in his place at the table. Mary was lifting Grace onto the pile of books in her chair, and Ma was setting a dish of steaming baked potatoes before Pa. "I do wish we had some butter for them," she said. Salt brings out the flavor," Pa was saying, when a loud knocking sounded on the kitchen door. Carrie ran to open it, and big and furry as a bear in his buffalo coat, Mr. Boast came in. "Come in, Boast, come in, Pa kept saying. They were so glad to see him. "Come in and put your feet under the table. You're just in time." "Where is Mrs. Boast?" Mary inquired. "Yes, indeed. She didn't come with you?" Ma said eagerly. Mr. Boast was getting out of his wraps. "Well, no, you see, Ellie thought she must do the washing while the sun shone. I told her we'll have more good days, but she said she'd come to town on one of them. She sent you some butter. It's from our last churning. My cows are going dry. The weather we've been having, I couldn't take care of them." "My cows are going dry," he said. "The weather we've been having, I couldn't take care of them." Mr. Boast sat up to the table, and they all began on the good baked potatoes with butter, after all. "Glad to know you came through the storm all right," Pa said. "Yep, we were lucky. I was watering the stock at the well when the cloud came up. I hurried them in, had them all snug in the stable, and got halfway to the house before the storm struck," Mr. Boast told them. Baked potatoes and hot biscuits with butter were delicious, and to finish the dinner, there were more biscuits with some of Ma's rich tomato preserves. "There's no more salt pork in town," Pa said. "Getting all our supplies from the east this way, we run a little short when trains don't come through." "Yeah, what do you hear about the train?" Mr. Boast asked him. "Well, they put extra gangs to work on the Tracy cut, Woodworth says," Pa replied, "and they're bringing out snow plows. We can look for a train before the end of the week." "Ellie's counting on my getting some tea and sugar and flour," said Mr. Boast. "The storekeeper's raising prices any?" "Not that I know of," Pa reassured him. "Nothing running short but meat." Dinner was eaten, and Mr. Boast said he must be getting along to reach home before night. He promised to bring Mrs. Boast in to see them all one day soon. Then he and Pa went up Main Street to Hartthorne's grocery, and Laura and Carrie, hand in hand, went joyously climbing up the drifts and sliding down them back to school. All that happy afternoon, they were full of cheer, cold air, and as bright as the sunshine. They knew their lessons perfectly. They enjoyed reciting them. Every face in school was smiling, and Cap Garland's flashing grin included them all. It was good to see the town alive again, and to know that all the weekdays would be school days. But in the night, Laura dreamed that Pa was playing the Wild Storm tune on his fiddle, and when she screamed to him to stop, the tune was a blinding blizzard swirling around her, and it had frozen her to solid ice. You read that again. The tune was a blinding blizzard swirling around her, and it had frozen her to solid ice. Well, that wouldn't have been a very good dream. Then she was staring at the dark, but for a long time that nightmare held her stiff and cold. How many people have had a nightmare that you just knew if you closed your eyes it would come right back and it would be horrible? I certainly have had nightmares like that. We've all had nightmares like that, I'm sure. It's just part of how our brains work. Nightmares are pretty amazing. But so then she was staring at the dark, but for a long time, that nightmare held her stiff and cold. It was not Pa's fiddle she heard, but the storm wind itself, and the swish, swish of icy snow on the walls and the roof. At last she was able to move, so cold that the dream still seemed half real. She snuggled close to Mary and pulled the quilts over her head. "What is it?" Mary murmured in her sleep. "A blizzard," Laura answered. Next chapter, no trains. It was not worthwhile to get up in the morning. The daylight was dim. The windows were white, and so were the nails in the roof. Another blizzard was roaring, screaming, and swishing around the house. There would be no school. Laura lay sluggish and half awake. She would rather sleep than wake up to such a day, but Ma called, "Good morning, girls. Time to get up." Quickly, because of the cold, Laura put on her dress and her shoes and went downstairs. "Why, what is the trouble, Laura?" Ma asked, looking up from the stove. Laura almost wailed. "Oh, Ma! How can I ever teach school and help send Mary to college? How can I ever amount to anything when I can get only one day of school at a time?" "Now, Laura," Ma said kindly, "you must not be so easily discouraged. A few blizzards more or less can make no great difference. We will hurry and get the work done. Then you can study. There is enough figuring in your arithmetic to keep you busy for a good many days, and you can do as much of it as you want to. Nothing keeps you from learning." Laura asked, "Why is the table here in the kitchen?" The table left hardly room to move about. Pa didn't build the fire in the heater this morning, Ma answered. They heard Pa stamping in the lean-to, and Mary and Laura opened the door for him. He looked sober. The little milk in the pail was frozen solid. Well, this is the worst yet, I do believe, Pa said while he held his stiff hands over the stove. I didn't start a fire in the heater, Caroline. Our coal is running low, and this storm will likely block the trains for some time. Well, I thought as much when I saw you hadn't built the fire, Ma answered. So I moved the table in here. We'll keep the middle door shut, and the cook stove warms this room nicely. You know, it always strikes me, no matter what happens, Ma finds a way. Probably the one exception is when she's dealing with Indians, which of course has caused a lot of problems for people who review the books academically and from a political correctness point of view. But really, there are very few things that trouble Ma. And this is really a serious situation, and yet Ma is finding a way to be positive, and positive for herself, for Charles, and probably most importantly for the girls. So Ma answered, so I moved the table in here. We'll keep the middle door shut, and the cook stove warms this room nicely. I'll go over to Fuller's right after breakfast, said Pa. He ate quickly, and while he was putting on his wraps again, Ma went upstairs. She brought down her little red Morocco pocketbook with the shining, smooth mother-of-pearl sides and the steel clasps in which she kept Mary's college money. Pa slowly put out his hand and took it. Then he cleared his throat and said, Mary, maybe the town's running short of supplies. If the lumber yard and stores are putting up prices too high. He didn't go on, and Mary said, Ma has my college money put away. You could spend that. If I have to, Mary, you can depend on me paying it back, Pa promised. After he had gone, Laura brought Mary's rocking chair from the cold front room and set it to warm before the open stove. As soon as Mary sat in it, Grace climbed up in her lap. I'll be warm too, Grace said. You're a big girl now and too heavy, Ma objected, but Mary said quickly, Oh no, Grace, I'd like to hold you, even if you're a big 3-year-old girl. Well, the room was so crowded that Laura could hardly wash the dishes without bumping into some sharp edge. While Ma was making the beds in the upstairs cold, Laura polished the stove and cleaned the lamp chimney. Then she unscrewed the brass chimney holder and filled the lamp carefully with kerosene. The last clear drop poured out from the spout of the kerosene can. Oh, we didn't tell Pa to get kerosene, Laura exclaimed before she thought. Don't we have kerosene? Carrie gasped, turning around quickly from the cupboard where she was putting away the dishes. Her eyes were frightened. My goodness, yes, I filled the lamp brim full, Laura answered. Now I'll sweep the floor and you dust. All the work was done when Ma came downstairs. The wind is fairly rocking the house up there, she told them, shivering by the stove. How nicely you've done everything, Laura and Carrie, she smiled. Pa had not come back, but surely he could not be lost in town. Laura brought her books and slate to the table, close to Mary in her rocking chair. The light was poor, but Ma did not light a lamp. Laura read the arithmetic problems one by one to Mary and did them on the slate while Mary solved them in her head. They worked each problem backward to make sure that they had the correct answer. Slowly they worked lesson after lesson, and as Ma had said, there were many more to come. At last they heard Pa coming through the front room. His overcoat and cap were frozen white with snow, and he carried a snowy package he thawed by the stove, and when he could speak, he said, I didn't use your college money, Mary. There's no coal at the lumber yard, he went on. People burn so much in this cold weather, and Eli didn't have much on hand. He's selling lumber to burn now, but we can't afford to burn lumber at $50 a thousand. Ah, people are foolish to pay it, Ma said gently. Trains are bound to get through before long. And there is no more kerosene in town, Pa said, and no meat. The stores are sold out of pretty nearly everything. I got 2 pounds of tea, Caroline, before they ran out of that, so we'll have our bit of tea till the trains come through. Well, there's nothing like a good cup of tea in cold weather, said Ma. And the lamp is full. There's enough kerosene to last quite a while if we go to bed early and to save the coal. I am so glad you thought to get the tea. We would miss that. Slowly, Pa grew warm, and without saying anything more, he sat down by the window to read the Chicago Inter-Ocean that had come in the last mail. By the way, he said, looking up, school is closed till coal comes. We can study by ourselves, Laura said stoutly. She and Mary murmured to each other over the arithmetic problems. Carrie studied the speller while Ma worked at her mending, and Pa silently read the paper. The blizzard grew worse. It was by far the most violent blizzard they had ever heard. The room grew colder. There was no heat from the front room to help the cook stove. The cold had crept into the front room and was sneaking in under the door. Beneath the lean-to door, it was crawling in too. Ma brought the braided rugs from the front room and laid them folded tightly against the bottom of the doors. At noon, Pa went to the stable. The stock did not need feeding at noon, but he went to see all that the horses and the cow and the big calf were still safely sheltered. He went out again in mid-afternoon. Animals need a lot of feed to keep them warm in such cold, he explained to Ma. The blizzard is worse than it was, and I had a hard tussle this morning to get hay into the stable in these winds. I couldn't do it if the haystack wasn't right at the door. Another good thing, the snowdrifts are gone. They've been scoured away down to the bare ground. The storm howled even louder when he went out into it, and a blast of cold came through the lean-to, though Ma had pushed the folded rug against the inner door as soon as Pa shut it. Mary was braiding a new rug. She had cut worn-out woolen clothes in strips, and Ma had put each color in a separate box. Mary kept the boxes in order and remembered where each color was. She was braiding the rag strips together in a long braid that coiled down in a pile beside her chair. When she came to the end of a strip, she chose the color she wanted and sewed it on. Now and then she felt the growing pile. I do believe I have nearly enough done, she said. I'll be ready for you to sew the rug tomorrow, Laura. I wanted to finish this lace first, Laura objected. And these storms keep making it so dark I can hardly see to count the stitches. And here they are. You can see Mary braiding and Laura working on her lace by the window. And if you look at the picture, it suggests that there is some light coming through, but the way she's describing it, it's not much light. It's very little light. And we've all been in storms where the clouds are so dark that it feels like nearly darkness in the daytime. And that's what they're facing right now. The dark doesn't bother me, Mary answered cheerfully. I can see with my fingers. Laura was ashamed of being impatient. I'll sew your rug whenever you're ready, she said willingly. Pa was gone a long time. Ma set the supper back to keep warm. She did not light the lamp, and they all sat thinking that the clothesline would guide Pa through the blinding blizzard. Come on, come, girls, Ma said, rousing herself. Mary, you start a song. We'll sing away the time until Pa comes. So they sang together in the dark until Pa came. There was lamplight at supper, but Ma told Laura to leave the dishes unwashed. They must all go to bed quickly to save the kerosene and the coal. Only Pa and Ma got up the next morning at chore time. "You girls stay in bed and keep warm as long as you like," Ma said. And Laura did not get up until 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock? I mean, that for a farmer's family, 9 o'clock, that's like half the day's gone. The cold was pressing on the house and seeping in, rising higher and higher, and the ceaseless noise and the dusk seemed to hold time still. Laura and Mary and Carrie studied their lessons. Laura sewed the rag braid into the round rug and laid it heavy over Mary's lap so that Mary could see it with her fingers. The rug made this day different from the day before, but Laura felt that it was the same day over again when they sang again in the dark until Pa came and ate the same supper of potatoes and bread with dried applesauce and tea, and left the dishes unwashed and went to bed at once to save kerosene and coal. Another day was the same. The blizzard winds did not stop roaring, and shrieking and swishing snow did not stop swishing. The noise and the dark and the cold would never end. Suddenly they ended. The blizzard wind stopped. It was late in the third afternoon. Laura blew and scraped at the frost on the window pane till through the peephole she could see snow scuttling down Main Street low on the ground before a straight wind. A reddish light shone on the blowing snow from the setting sun. The sky was clear and cold. Then the rosy light faded. The snow was blowing gray-white, and the steady wind blew harder. Pa came in from doing the chores. "Now, tomorrow I must haul some hay," he said. "But now I'm going across to Fuller's to find out if anybody but us is alive in this blamed town. Here for 3 whole days we haven't been able to see a light nor smoke nor any sign of a living soul. What's the good of a town if a fella can't get any good of it?" "Supper's almost ready, Charles," Ma said. "I'll be back in a jiffy," Pa told her. He came back in a few minutes asking, "Supper ready?" Ma was dishing it up and Laura setting the chairs to the table. "Everything's all right in town," Pa said. "And word from the depot is that they'll start work tomorrow morning on the big cut this side of Tracy." "Well, how long will it take to get the train through?" Laura asked. "I can't tell," Pa replied. "That one clear day we had, they cleaned it out, ready to come through the next day, but they shoveled the snow up both sides of the cut, and now it's packed full, clear to the top of the banks, something like 30 feet of snow. Frozen solid. They've got to dig it out now." "That won't take very long in pleasant weather," Ma said. "Surely we're bound to have that. We've already had more and worse storms than we had all last winter." Let me read that again. "We've already had more and worse storms than we had all last winter." That's sort of a foreboding line to read in the book. And in dramatic terms, you sort of know when someone says something like that, "We've already had more and worse storms than we had all last winter." In dramatic terms, you know that more and much worse is coming. Someone said, "I'm glad to be alive." Some character said, "I'm so glad to be alive." In dramatic terms, you'd think that, well, maybe they're not going to be alive for much longer. It's just sort of that foreshadowing of things, and I think that this is what Laura has done here. We've already had more and worse storms than we had all last winter. Well, we need to come back and see how the storms go tomorrow. But when the book is called The Long Winter, I think we can be confident that there's going to be more storms, more winter, more cold, more deprivation, more challenges for the Ingalls as they shelter in place during the beginnings of this very hard winter. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Thursday, the 4th of June. I will not be here Friday, the 5th of June. Allison will be reading on Friday, the 5th. I have to be out of town that day, but Allison will read, and I'm so grateful that she has allowed me to step in and read this book. It's a great read, and I hope you're enjoying it. I'm certainly enjoying reading it for you, and thank you for being here today. I'm going to jump now. We will pick up tomorrow. We'll pick up tomorrow with a chapter called Fair Weather, but I don't think it's going to last very long. I just have this feeling. But thank you for being here today. Take care of yourselves. Wash your hands, wear your masks, watch your social distancing. Take care of yourselves. All the best. More long winter tomorrow, Thursday, the 4th of June. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.